Hello and welcome to today's session. I hope you're all doing amazingly well from whichever part of the world you are watching. Today is the second part of the three-part series on the exit strategies available to wellness directors who want to transition from the operational role to a consulting role. Last week, we talked about exit route one, the internal consultant. So you become the internal consultant of your hotel group. So you have a previous relationship with this property and you are safely transitioning into becoming that consultant of the group. And I have found that exit route one was kind of the softest landing into consulting work. Exit route two, the project based consultant. This is for people who want more adventure and who also want to tap into a higher income potential. But before I delve into the meat and potatoes of today's episode and today's session, I wanted to highlight that though I have created this three-part series for those spa and wellness leaders who want to transition into a more consulting role, I think it's also very valuable for my landowners out there. So you are these owners who own a piece of land and want to build something meaningful on your property. So you want to build something meaningful on your land. So this property, a small property that has rooms, that has a food and beverage outlet, that has wellness offerings. This is what you want to offer. And you also know, because you are not part of a bigger chain and because this is your money, this is your patrimony coming out, you don't always have the profit and loss that perhaps larger chains do. Hence, knowing all the different options out there on how you can actually strategically tap into very high quality talent will be useful to you. Because during the course, I mean, that doesn't only apply to wellness, it also applies to other areas within your business. There will be times where you have your internal team as a baseline that can manage day to day operations, know the location, and they're also local. And then if you need any additional talent, any additional expertise to come on board, you know that you can tap into these people for a short space of time. So while this three-part series is for my wellness leaders, friends who actually want to transition into consulting, I think my landowners, you will also gain a lot from these three different strategies. So you know what's out there and what talent is out there and what kind of options are available. So going back to today's topic, so we're talking about exit to the project-based consultant. As I mentioned, this is the route that has a higher income potential and it is more adventurous. And it's a route that I have loved a lot. And to be honest, I remember during the early years of my consulting work, I literally went from pre-opening to pre-opening to pre-opening. And I loved it so much. It was very tiring. I had that constant adrenaline rush, visiting new locations, visiting new teams. Such a beautiful experience. And I got to be hands on as well as be that consultant. And I learned so much. And that experience, those experiences over several years, what I learned from those experiences actually have laid the foundations for the success I've had in my consulting business. So today I want to talk about this path that might be available to you, and this might be your wheelhouse. So last week, we talked about the safest route, becoming the internal consultant of a hotel group you've already worked at. So you are familiar with the owners, you're familiar with the property, you've created a relationship. So it's easy to transition from being the wellness leader into being the specific wellness consultant. And it's a softer landing, it's safer, probably less income, but it's a very nice kind of soft landing. Today's path gives you more variety, but it also comes with a higher income potential and the chance to see the world while you're doing what you love doing. But it also requires different skills and it comes with unique challenges that don't always fit everyone. So it's not something that is for everyone. I think it's also important to mention that. So before I go into more detail about project based consulting, let's go into really define what it is. So, what is project based consulting? My definition that I've written down is project based consulting means you work on one specific wellness project at a time and then you move on to the next. So instead of being permanently employed at one property, you are hired as a specialist to complete a particular assignment and then you're done and you move on. And the four kind of roles I've seen this take in practice, they look like this. So you had the pre-opening project. So you're brought in 3 to 6 months before opening. And your job is to sometimes design the concept, hire staff, create the SOPs, write the FF&D list and OS&D list, and actually work, make sure that you get everything you need in order to open the spa and launch operations. The next role this project based consulting has is what I called interim director roles. A property loses their wellness director and needs someone experienced to step in for a short period of time, anywhere between 2 6 months. Sometimes I've even seen up to 2 years. And their job is to pretty much make sure that the ship is afloat. We're giving guests superlative experiences. The business is functioning. They do not need a lot of hand holding and they just hit the ground running while the hotel or the property has the time to find the right candidate without being stressed that their wellness operations are kind of slipping away. The third role is what I call those roles in renovation projects. So they're not quite pre-openings. They have an existing spa that is being redesigned, revamped, it's getting a facelift, and they need an expert to oversee the transformation and relaunch it for them. And the fourth role that this project based consulting takes is what I call turnaround assignments. So you have a struggling wellness operation and they need someone to diagnose a problem and implement the solution within a set period of time, 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months. So this is what project-based consulting is. And these are the four roles you generally, or at least I have seen. There are other roles available, but the ones that I have seen and I have done, each and every one of them, tends to be the pre-opening projects, the interim director roles, the renovation projects, and the turnaround assignments. And the key difference between this exit route and the other one, so unlike exit route 1, which is the internal consultant, and exit route 2, which is the full-blown strategic consultant where you are designing from afar, the project-based consulting puts you on site, it's hands-on, and you are working there for a defined period with a very specific deliverable. And once that period and deliverable is done, you're done and you move on to the next project. So essentially, your relationship to each of these projects is you're essentially a wellness mercenary. So you're highly skilled, you are brought in to solve specific problems, then you disappear into your next assignment. So this is how properties get world-class expertise without long-term employment commitments, and you get variety, premium rates, and incredible learning experiences in actually very beautiful locations. So there are many pros to this. So ultimately what you're doing is you work project to project, property to property, and challenge to channeled. And challenge to challenge, can't even speak properly. And no two assignments will ever be the same, no matter how much experience you have. But each has a roughly clear start date, a very defined scope, and an end date when you pack up and move on to your next adventure. So it is for that adventurous spirit and also that nomad at heart. Now, that is what project based consulting is. And I've also highlighted the four roles that that project based consulting takes. Now, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of this exit route because I think it's interesting to know what exactly is involved when it comes to project based consulting. Now, here are the reasons why this path can be incredible. The first reason is you have variety and growth. So you will never be bored, I promise you. And each project brings in new challenges, different cultures, and fresh perspectives. So one month you're doing the pre-opening in Bali, let's say, and next month you are an interim director in Switzerland. And this very exposure is what accelerates your learning curve exponentially. You might think you might have all the operations experience, but as a wellness director, you tend to be in the same property for a long time and sometimes within the same brand, just moving from location to location. But when it comes to project based consulting, you are playing in a very different level. So there is a lot of variety, a lot of growth, new sets of challenges, and you're constantly kind of problem solving. The second kind of advantage with project based consulting is you have premium income potential. So, project based consultants command higher daily rates than permanent employees because you are solving specific problems with specialized expertise, and properties are very willing to pay that premium in order to get that specific expertise during a specific period of time because they know that their internal talent would never be able to deliver that in that result in such a short period of time. The other advantage of project based consulting is relationships. You build such a strong, solid network of professionals. You get deep hands on time with teams. So, not only your wellness teams, but you also get the pre opening team, the entire executive team, the general manager. Now, clearly, I always talk about wellness and hospitality. So, you get to meet everyone in the hotel when they're in that pre-opening phase. For example, if you're taking on a pre-opening role or you're taking on an interim turnaround assignment, you're actually in the trenches with these people working side by side. And this actually builds your network organically and gives you a real understanding of how different operations, different brands, different cultures work. And this is invaluable when you're trying to establish yourself as a consultant. You need that network. And also, lastly, I have found that project based consulting is the perfect training ground. So, if you could call it, I call this the consulting school in real life. You learn how to adapt quickly, solve problems under pressure, and work with very diverse teams. And the skills you'll need to advance in your consulting career are precisely this: your ability to adapt, your ability to solve problems, your ability to create relationships, build these solid relationships. And that is, this huge, perfect training ground that at least I have seen in my own experience. So As you can see, I'm also very biased towards project based consulting because I had such a wonderful experience. And even though I've had my business for 18 years, there are times when I had to go back into full time employment and I used them as project based consulting. So you get to do all the deep work, you get to actually work on something and see it through to the finish line without really getting involved in company politics or caring whether are you going to be promoted across the ranks. All that stress is removed and you just have all the time and space to really enjoy doing what you love doing. So I have found it the perfect training ground. That said, though there are many pros of this project-based consulting role, there are also challenges that I think it's important to highlight. Those challenges are lifestyle. It is a very disruptive lifestyle. You are essentially homeless for months on end. You're living out of a suitcase, away from your regular family and friends, though you're meeting new friends. And you're also living in very temporary accommodations, new ways of living, new cultures, new foods. And this takes a toll, and that's easy to underestimate the toll it takes on you, on your body, on your mental well being, on your physical well being. And it tends to be hidden when you're all excited about the adventure of going to a particular location, meeting new people, building this amazing spa, opening this amazing spa. The second challenge I'd say about the project based consulting is operational immersion. Still, you are, you're very operational when you are in a project based role. It is very difficult to strategize when you from your laptop in a remote area, or if you are in day-to-day operations many days a week and sometimes missing your days off, you're starting early, finishing late, you end up really only being able to work on one project at a time. You really don't have that space to do more projects at the same time if you are going to do it well. And this role, this project based role, is essentially a glorified operational role during a specific period of time with a specific deliverable. And you do need to take that into account that you become highly operational. And sometimes the only thing you can realistically do is work on this project. You cannot work on a number of projects at the same time. And this also leads to the next challenge. And this is about building your project pipeline, to the stress around building your pipelines. So you fall victim, and I've done that so many times. I've got so many t-shirts. Don't want to go back into it. You go into the typical feast and famine cycle where, you're completely absorbed in your current project. You love it so much. You love the people. You treat it as if it were yours. And then you very quickly forget sometimes that, you're there temporary. And then when your time's up, your time's up. And it's kind of this, the disconnect, you're leaving that place. But when you are in that deeply operational, when you're deeply immersed, you're so happy where you are that you stop looking for new clients. And even if you are looking for new clients, it makes it so incredibly stressful to maintain your pipeline. And this creates gaps between projects that can be very financially stressful. So I do remember those moments where I had this feast, famine, feast, famine. So I'd have one project come on, and then suddenly another one, they'd call me to be part of that project, and I had to let them down. For example, I can't be in two places at the same time. And then once my gig was over and done, then I'm suddenly, all dry. I didn't nourish or didn't nurture that pipeline. And another challenge with this project based consulting is the limited scalability you have. As I mentioned earlier, and you can only work on one project at a time, which also caps your income potential. So while you might earn more per project, it means that at the end of the year, when you put it all on a balance, you potentially actually, you have a ceiling. There's only so much you can earn in a year. There are only so many projects you can do in a year. And you essentially fall into the trap of trading time for money. And there are only so many hours in your day, and there are only so many days in a year. So you reach that ceiling, and it's a very hard ceiling very quick. So I have also noticed that in my experience in the 18 years of doing project based consulting. And given these pros and these cons, so we've seen in terms of pros, you get the variety, the growth, you have a higher income potential, you create your network. That opportunity to create a solid network is amazing for your business, and it's also the perfect training ground to create your consulting business, to develop those skills that you will need later on. They are those challenges. It is disruptive on your life, right? And also on your health. You are very immersed in operations, so you better like operations and get used to being the person who actually does cover a shift when one of the employees decides to leave. And I've had several occasions the wellness director leave halfway, so I chip in and do take on that role. So you are very operational and you need to like operations. And this means that there is also that stress in building your pipeline of your future projects. And then there is, that limited scalability. There is a cap on how many projects you can realistically do each year. So I think, if you are looking to go down this path of exit route two, if you want to decide, I think here's the way, this is the advice I would give. This path is perfect for you if you love travel, you crave variety, and you want to build consulting skills while earning premium rates. And this path is not for you if you value home stability. So if you value being close to your friends, your family, this role isn't for you. And this route is also very difficult if you want to scale beyond trading your time for money, or if you prefer strategic work over hands-on operations. Then you probably find that exit route 2 is probably not your path. Then you'd either go for exit route 1, which is the internal consultant of a hotel group that you already worked with, or can exit route 3, which is the strategic consultant that's then a full-blown consultant. So this brings us to the end of the second part of this 3-part series. And to recap, last week, we talked about exit route 1, and I would call it your safest option, the softest landing, going from wellness director to an internal consultant of the hotel group where you've already developed that relationship. Exit route 2 is for you if you want to take it a step further. If you really want to jump into the deep end and get the band-aid off and say, no, I want to go to the consulting school, say going from one project to another project, getting as much exposure as you can, living in new countries, new cultures, being part of new teams, very diverse perspectives. And it teaches you the skills that I promise you need during the course of your consulting career. You need to be able to adapt. You need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to problem solve very quickly. And you need to be thinking quick on your feet And these are the skills that I have found that project based consulting helped me so much to build that solid base that I'm enjoying today as that full blown strategic consultant. And next week, what we're going to talk about is probably the exit route with the biggest jump. So it is not the safest bet, um, but it is the best choice if you want to have more longevity out of your consulting career. And that means you become the full blown strategic consultant and you're working afar with your clients. You're not always on site with them. And in order to be able to make a living of being a strategic consultant, you will need to develop a series of skills that will help you have that sustainable income over several years. So you can literally retire being that strategic consultant. So we'll be looking into that in more detail next week. And in the meantime, I wish you all a beautiful day ahead. Take care now.